So the institution-based view, you have external relationships, so home country and host country, and governments that make formal rules that govern the firms. And your internal relationships, home countries govern overseas subsidiaries that don't have laws in the US but is frowned upon because of the loss of jobs at home, and then the firms experience backlash. Host countries have numerous informal institutions. Informal rules can be hidden and hard to change, and they govern more strategy choices than the formal rules. Knowledge management, there are structures, processes, systems which develop, leverage, and transfer knowledge. This is information management, basically. You have explicit knowledge, which is written down and transferred without losing the richness, so like from IT departments and stuff, that type of knowledge. And you have tacit knowledge, which is non-confidable and it requires hands-on experience, so you're learning by doing. Knowledge management, there are 4 types of M&Es. So you have the there's a graph. So home application, localization, global standardization, transnational. So you have your different strategies here. And then it shows the interdependence and the role of foreign subsidiaries, the development of diffusion of knowledge, the flow of knowledge. So I'm not going to read that word for word, but that especially with the examples of each one, really showed what each one is like. There are problems and solutions with the transfer of knowledge, so people can leave a place and leak info or take it with them. High turnover can really cause the failure to share knowledge, so there's inappropriate transmission channels. Open innovation, there's emerging use of purposive inflow and outflow of knowledge to increase internal innovation and expand markets. So subsidiaries are willing to share info, then problems can arise. There can be global virtual teams, which happens a lot. There's people in multiple locations. The body language can be different and it comes across differently than face-to-face. So a firm may need to look at meeting face-to-face. There's absorptive capacities, recognizing value of new information and assimilate it and apply it. If limited, it can block the inflow of knowledge. And then the solution, so you can reward bonuses to the successful inflow and outflow of knowledge, or incentives, different incentives within the company, or you can invest in codifying tacit knowledge. Due to time, I'm not going to go over the 2 debates of chapter 10, but there they are. And then there's 4 strategies. So in order to get the right strategy and structure, you need to understand the evolutions of each industry. So it can vary industry to industry. And then leverage multinational presence by developing learning and innovation capabilities. So thinking global and acting local. Master the external rules and then be flexible with changing of the rules of the game internally. Chapter 11. So owners. So we have concentrated versus diffuse. So concentrated have control and rights. Diffuse, there's a bunch of different small shareholders, so nobody has dominance. And this is 80% of the US. And then there's separation of ownership and control. And this is dispersal of ownership among small shareholders, controlled by salaried professional managers. And then you have institutional investors, manage mutual funds or pension pools. And this type is increasing heavily now. Then you have family ownership. There's better incentives to focus on long-term performance and minimize conflict between owner and manager, but may lead to less qualified management because you're having people's sons and brothers and family in that may not have those management skills needed. Then you have state ownership. That suffers from incentive problem. It doesn't boost performance. But all citizens own it but have no rights to dividends. Then managers. So there's agency relationship. This is the relationship between principals. This is the owner who delegates things. And then the agents are managers who the authority is delegated to from the principal. The agency theory thinks that interests of principals and agents don't completely overlap, that there will be conflict. There's a principal-agent conflicts, and this is conflict of interest between shareholder and managers, and this creates agency costs. And there's agency problems, excessive executive compensation, which is huge in the US, on-job consumption like corporate jets, low-risk short-term investments, empire building, excess CEO returns, and information asymmetries, which agents know more about property than the principals do. Principal-to-principal conflicts, so issues with family-owned business and family members being on the board, lots of conflicts of interest there. Expropriation, activities that enrich controlling shareholders at the expense of the minorities. You have tunneling, managers from controlling family of corporate divert resources for their own personal use. This happens probably a lot more than we think. And then related transactions, controlling owners sell assets to another firm they own for below market price. Board of directors, so this is inside directors are the top executives, outside directors are non-management members of the board. CEO duality is when a chairman of the board and CEO are a chairman of the board and the CEO. So this is reduced top-level conflicts because it's not two people, but is the CEO really being evaluated fairly because he's head of the board? Probably not. Lead independent director is a leader of a board who chairs CEO. Interlocking directorate or board interlock, this is when two or more firms share one board of director. The role of board of directors is control, service, resource acquisition of functions. So Chapter 11, directing strategically. So ideal boards are neither absentee or heavy-handed. So there's a right balance for that, which is hard to find. Directors strategically prioritize differently around the world, and they focus on financial control, which may increase focus on the short term instead of the long term. Governance mechanisms, you have voice-based, so shareholders' willingness to work with managers. They're voicing concern. So there's carrots, which increase executive compensation, or there's sticks, it's getting rid of CEO shareholder activism. So large shareholders wanting to maximize returns, and small shareholders pushing proposals. There's several more there. And then there's exit-based mechanisms, which are external, and they no longer have patience and want to sell shares. So market for product competition, corporate control, private equity, internal and external mechanisms together create a package. External mechanisms force improvement of internal mechanisms that work together. And here is the global perspective of internal and external government mechanism, showing where the US is and Canada. So the industry-based consideration, outside directors, is more performance enhancing, but it ignores industry differences. Insider ownership may not exist in low-growth, stable industries. And then you have CEO duality again. The resource base, so managerial human capital, the skills and abilities that top managers have. And this can be one of the most valuable things, and it's very hard to imitate. A lot of firms fail when they have mergers and acquisitions because they don't realize how important this is. Organizational, so the top people can make the difference. They can motivate and have a positive impact on the rest. Institution-based, so is a difference in separation of ownership and control in Anglo-American firms, where the rest of the world concentrates on ownership and control. Weaker the formal institution protecting the shareholder, the more concentrated ownership and control rights will be. Changing political choices will encounter resistance, and informal norms have changed. There's a rise of capitalism, impact of globalization, and global diffusion of best practices. I'm not going to go through the debates, but there they are, just for the lack of time. And then we have the strategies. So no. know the principal agent and principal-to-principal conflicts, differentiate on corporate governance dimensions, and master the rules and anticipate change. Chapter 12, Social Responsibility. So we have corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and this is a corporation's responsibility for social benefits and economic gains, but it's beyond the narrow economic, legal, and technical requirements, so it's more than that. Managers have to balance a fiduciary duty to stakeholders and promoting CSR, which is very hard. The stakeholder view of this, so you have key goal is global sustainability, meet needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations. So sustainable, social, natural, and capitalism. Drivers are promoting sustainability, increased levels of population, income equality, debates of globalization and deglobalization. Non-governmental organizations and civil society stakeholders have role of monitor, enforcer of standards of social and environmental issues, and industrialization, which have irreversible effects on the environment like global warming. So there are primary stakeholder groups, and these rely on constituents for survival. And then there's the secondary, which are like the environmental groups, like ones that would fight pollution and stuff like that. Managers need to focus on a triple bottom line, and this includes economic, social, and environmental performance, which is a very hard balance to do. There's corporate social performance, and it's the outcome of the firm's CSR. And then there's environmental, social, governance performance. This is a yardstick with economic, social, and government dimensions, kind of how you measure the performance. And then there's socially responsible investment. This is the investment in firms that have an excellent environmental, social, and governance performance. So there's a huge debate on CSR, and it's centered around the nature of the firm and society. Why does it exist? What is the purpose? And most people owning their stakeholders would say to make money. The shareholder primacy, it's a view that places shareholders as single most important stakeholder group. There's stakeholder capitalism, which is view of capitalism that suggests firms must respect the stakeholder interest. And then you have CSR advocates argue that a free market system can breed the greed and not care about the environment. And the debate goes on whether all stakeholders have an equal right. The CSR critics view as greed is viewed as an incentive in free markets, so there are different views depending on how you look at it. Then you have the stakeholder primacy view, and this is newer in 2019. This is a major turning point, and firms need to have fundamental commitment to all stakeholders, which is customers, employees, suppliers, communities, shareholders. So the industry-based view, rivalry, so differentiation, so for example, fuel efficiency and reduce environmental footprint, this can provide differentiation and increase competition. Entrance threats, investing in CSR deters entrance, so new entrants must match everything else plus the CSR investments, and that's really hard to do. The bargaining power for suppliers, so you have social and environmentally responsible suppliers that provide differentiated products, so this increases the supplier's bargaining power. The power of the buyers, buyers can force a firm to extract concessions because of the things going on that they maybe are on a strike or something like that. The threat of substitutes forces firms to scan the environment in more broad perspective, so like solar energy. And then looking at turning threats to opportunities. Not all firms are equal for CSR challenge exposure, so may want to turn some threats into opportunities instead of just looking at it as a costly thing. Resource-based, so value, you have social issue participation. This is how a firm engages in social causes that are not directly related to stakeholders. This reduces the shareholder value, and it does not serve the triple bottom line. Rarity, so not always rare. CSR resources are not always rare, so both competitors possess the ability to do this. Imitability must be sustainable and not temporary. It does not translate to tangible gains.